So, when's the last time you felt stuck in a rut or thought this? If I knew what to do about getting along better with my boss, I would do it. Those are perfect examples of how professional coaching can help you learn about getting unstuck. Those situations are things our guest, coaching expert Pamela Grant, knows all about. I'm your host, Honey Shelton, and this is Training Matters.
Training Matters is brought to you by the Training Institute, dedicated to setting the standard for individuals responsible for training effectiveness in banks and credit unions across the country.
Welcome, Pamela. Tell us all about yourself and what your work with Life Callings is all about.
Thanks for having me, honey. I was in corporate life for 22 years in management, and frankly, I was stuck myself and pretty unhappy. I went back and got a master's degree in occupational education because I wanted to help people be more successful and, frankly, a lot happier in their careers. And that's what I work with. I work with people who don't want to be stuck. Some of them feel like they're stagnant, and they just don't have the communication skills to move forward and to have the career life that they want.
Well, that sounds awesome. And of course, audience, I do want to tell you that I've had the pleasure of knowing Pamela a long time, and she is my coach. So I know what this woman is all about. So I'm going to put her in the question and answer chair today. Something I think our audience would like to hear about is this idea of an internal coach, which those responsibilities often fall on the manager or a supervisor. And then this idea of an external coach. I think all of us have heard those terms before, but most of us probably couldn't list the benefits of one over the other. We'll talk about the benefits as this progresses, Pamela, but can you start with giving us your definition of what those terms mean?
Sure. It's fairly simple. The internal coach works within the same company, exactly the same place where the coachee works. They have the company's agenda as their compass. Their main job is to help the employee be more successful in that company's environment. Whereas the external coach is an independent coach and works outside the company. Their main job is to help the employee be successful in every area of their life. They are the advocate for the coachee while maintaining some of the company's goals. They are trained professionals in coaching, and their communication is supportive, not disciplinary.
Great way to differentiate those two. One point you just made that is so fresh on my mind in my work is we know that external coaches that have credentials or have sought paths that really educate them about coaching are, just as you described, an advocate for the coachee, mindful of what the company, their expectations perhaps of how people could grow through coaching. And I know, of course, that both of us recognize the confidentiality factor that happens and is a must with an external coach. But I'm curious, it's an expense, it's a decision, it's a commitment. How do you think companies that have engaged with you, how did they recognize they needed to offer it? And what's your experience been like about who initiates making an external coach available in a company?
Well, you just said the most important word, and that's this need for confidentiality. And internal coaches sometimes have a real struggle with that. And if the internal coach doesn't, a lot of times the employee does. So if there's a culture of distrust of any kind within the organization, that's usually the first sign that they want an external coach. The coachee needs to feel safe to say whatever they want to say, and then we'll probably practice saying it in a professional manner where they can get good results. But at least they need to have that outlet as they're talking to someone. A lot of times executives of the company want an external coach because, frankly, they don't want the rest of the company knowing what they're dealing with, what they're struggling with, and they also want a perspective that is outside of what they've been hearing from everybody within their company. And so sometimes that works really well. The external coach can also use a variety of assessments or exercises for the client, and many times the internal coach does not have that expertise or does not have that experience.
Oh, you put that so well, and it is true about tools. Having insight about personality style or communication style is so helpful when you are coaching with someone. What other examples can you think of where you've really focused on something? Maybe even if you talk a little bit about tolerations, because I know you introduced me to that idea, and here we are 20 something years later, and I'm still coming back to some of those ideas that were new to me that you introduced to me. So do you want to explore that a little bit about what your approach is in helping people identify traps or detours?
Sure. I start out with trying to help them assess their life and where their energy drains are. And a lot of times what they're tolerating in life is a big energy drain. So sometimes we identify those and people just go out and take care of them. So if you have a lot of tolerations going on at home, they are going to rob your energy for being as successful as you can in the office. Same thing, if you have a lot of tolerations in the office, they are going to drain your energy for being a good problem solver, for having the energy to be successful. And let me give you a couple of examples. Tolerations in the home can be that terrible stack of junk mail that keeps growing overnight, and you look at it and you just don't do anything about it, but you don't realize it's draining your energy. Conversely, a toleration in the office can be a desk that is overwhelmingly messy. You don't know how to find things. It actually produces fear because you're not sure you're in control. And a lot of times that can cause a lack of energy to move forward and can keep you stuck, as you were just talking about. The other thing that I talked about with virtually every client is setting boundaries. And boundaries are a tremendous energy drain if you're not setting them, where there's behavior that you're resenting, behavior that is inappropriate from others, but most people don't know how to speak a boundary, so they don't know how to take care of it. And therefore, it goes from resentment to anxiety to anger and sometimes rage, and rage usually is very quiet, where people just decide, you know what, I quit. So those are two very important beginning steps for any client so that they can, number one, shore up their energy, and number two, set some boundaries so that they know that they are being respected.
Oh, great. Boy, boundaries. I think it would be fun to do something here about boundaries. I hear this a lot. I'm sure you do too. I've actually been an offender of this, and that is intrusiveness, where in the workplace people walk into someone's office who's on the phone, walk up to their workspace, invade it without meaning to do harm or be intrusive. It's just a blind spot. How would you tell a employee to request a boundary with a coworker who barges into their workplace or sits down at their desk and turns papers around to look at them, things like that? Or they're on the phone. The coworker just comes in and sits down while they're on the phone. I think a lot of our audience is going to identify with that. So why don't you give us a quick lesson in how you would teach the coachee who's saying, I have this problem, how to set a boundary?
Well, I give them a script, and it works for everybody. First, you say the person's name so you know you have their attention. And you tell them, it doesn't work for me when, and then you state the behavior, and then you say, please, and you state what you want. So in your case, it would be, Rufus, it doesn't work for me when you interrupt when I'm on the phone. Please wait until I have completed my phone call. People even walk through the door, even if the door is closed. And you can do the same thing. When my door is closed, please wait until I open it. Unless the building is burning down or something, of course. So
I love that. That's so simple, yet it can be such a scary thing if we're real inexperienced about setting boundaries. And I'll bet, too, I'd like to hear you talk about this just a little more, because you spoke about resentments and you talked about how this emotion can escalate. My experience has been that some of us, sad but true, only set boundaries when we're fueled by the power of being angry. And so we might have a blind spot. How do you help a coachee identify some of these blind spots?
Well, first of all, I listen to how upset they may or may not be, but I used to be one of those people who never said anything until you pushed me in a corner, and then I came out like a lion. And I explained to people that I found out the hard way that will ruin a relationship. There's no chance to bring it back once that happens. So I asked them to start identifying small resentments. Get in touch with how you feel about how you're being treated. So if somebody is coming in and interrupting your telephone conversation, pay attention. Are you resenting that? Can you really pay attention to your call? If so, you set the boundary then. Because if you don't set the boundary at the resentment level, it automatically goes to the anxiety level. And the anxiety level is when you're having the conversation with the person on the way into work, but they're not in the car with you. You're just having the whole conversation. Again, you could set a boundary. If you choose to do nothing, it goes to anger. And that's on the day when you're already stressed and they walk in for the fourth time and you blow up at them.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you can set a boundary. But if you don't, it'll elevate even more, and I hear things like, I quit, you're fired, whatever, because it was never handled step by step by step. And we try and make sure that we get them aware of their feelings so that they can do it at the early stage of resentment.
Great. Wonderful advice. One of the last things I'd like to lean on your expertise about is, what advice would you give to an internal coach who really does want to help develop their team one-on-one? Give us some advice you'd give a manager, a supervisor who wants to learn more about how to be a better coach.
Well, first of all, I'd like them to identify whether they really want to be a coach or they just want to be a mentor. And either one is fine. And being a mentor says, you want to end this relationship in friendship as well. Whereas as a coach, you have to be willing to give maybe some hard feedback at times. So first of all, be very clear about that. Secondly, I would encourage the internal coach to train with an external coach to learn the communication skills, perhaps to identify some assessments they want to use while they're doing it, and to really get the feel of what coaching is about. And thirdly, I would also say the internal coach has got to be really clear with their HR department that they're not stepping on each other's toes. HR has one job to do, coaching is another. And internal coaches should not be disciplinarians. I don't ever want them to get that reputation, because nobody will ever trust them. That's HR's job or the boss's job. So they need to make sure that they are in an arena where they can keep very firm confidentiality, where they know they can be supportive of the person, and where they get some training themselves so that they know the best avenue to take with people.
Oh, great advice. Love that, Pamela. I know that our audience is really going to benefit from your examples as well as some of these important do's and don'ts for the internal coach. Why don't you share with our audience how they can get in touch with you? I know you've authored a book or two, so give us how people can reach out and learn more about you or even consider coaching with you.
Well, it's pretty simple. They can go online and look up Life Callings. Please don't forget the S at the end of that, lifecallings.com, and they can put in a request there. I'm also very open to people calling me direct, and that number is 936-327-3270. I always do a complimentary coaching call with somebody to see if it's a good fit, both for them and for me, and we just talk out what's going on and how they might like to move forward. Honey, one thing I forgot to say was, in my past experience, sometimes I've been used as an external coach if the company feels that the employee is on the last step before termination and they want an outside opinion and one last go with that person to make sure that they're making the right decision. So that part I had forgotten about.
Well, that is great, and I know that I, along with the audience, really appreciate learning more about how to not only get unstuck, but avoid getting stuck again and again. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to rate Training Matters 5 stars on iTunes. Also, check out our website. For any episodes you may have missed, we pick guests just like Pamela Grant. I think you can learn from them. So you can check us out at interaction-training.com.
You've been listening to Training Matters with Honey Shelton.